Hello everybody, I'm Kyle from Zero Strategy Games, and I'm here to teach you how to play our game Shuffle Dungeons. So, if you don't know anything about Shuffle Dungeons, it is a 1 to 4 player cooperative dungeon crawler where you build the board as you're playing the game. So, you'll have a unique cast of 8 heroes, you'll be gathering equipment, fighting smaller monsters, ultimately with the goal to work together with your teammates and defeat the boss in the center before the deck runs out of cards. Every card in this game is double-sided, so you have the option of using things as a room or as things like consumables or pieces of equipment such as armor and weapons. So you'll always have that option of playing either a room to help you get around the dungeon, meet up with your teammates, help you more, strategically move through the dungeon. Some rooms have benefits and buffs, so there's kind of like a puzzle building aspect as well. What we're going to do today is kind of just go through, the rules, go through the components, look at, what's inside the box, and just kind of set up and show you guys how things work, show you how a turn works, show you how combat works, different things like that. So cool. Let's get into it. All right, guys. So whenever you open up your box of Shuffle Dungeons, you're going to see all different types of components. You're going to see, multiple little cardboard pieces. Obviously you're going to have cards, your player tokens, things like that. So let's just dive in and talk about a couple of the pieces. So here at the top, you will see these kind of big, taller, longer pieces. This is going to be your dungeon deck tower. It comes disassembled. You'll have to, disassemble to fit it back into the box, things like that. So we could have a smaller box to be able to ship out to you guys. But there is a section in the rulebook on putting it together. It's pretty simple. You just have the Shuffle Dungeons logo, and you have the monster pieces on the outside. You just slide them in, hook them, and go down. You'll do that with your other side here. You'll hook them in and down. And then you will put this heart piece on the bottom here, slide it right in. There we go. And then this will be your top. So this dungeon deck tower is going to be where you place all of the cards that you're going to be playing the game with. So the reason for having something like this is, one, it keeps your cards in relative easy order, and also so you don't know how many cards are left. As I mentioned before, you're trying to defeat that boss before your deck runs out of cards. So it adds a little bit of tension. It's an optional thing that you can do, is having your cards in here. You don't know what's going to come up next, whether it's going to be a monster or a weapon or equipment. So you kind of have that tension of, I want to draw my cards, but I don't know what's coming next, and I don't know how many cards are left. So it kind of adds to the risk reward kind of thing. So that is our deck tower. We also have in here, obviously, our cards, our dungeon deck. These are going to be filled with all these different types of cards. So we will go over different types of rooms and different types of, equipment and things in a bit. We'll just keep taking things out of the box here. Let's see, we also have, as part of our cards, we have our heroes. Like I said, there are 8 different heroes, all with unique stats and abilities. We also have, of course, cardboard punch outs for the characters. They go in their standees. We have those for all 8 of the characters. We have our damage tokens. These will be just for tracking, health and things on your equipment and your character itself, as well as damage on enemies, like monsters and boss monsters. You also have dice here. 4 red enemy dice, as well as 6 player dice. And we have this extra token in here. It's the end of round token. This is for an optional rule variant. It says end of round, burn 1 card from the top of the deck for each active monster on the map. There's a section later in the rulebook that talks about optional rules. You know, there's ways to make the game more difficult, more challenging. You know, once you played through it a couple of times, being able to kind of spice up gameplay with different ways to play, you know. We have that in the end of the rulebook. So as well as your dungeon deck of cards, there are also various boss monsters. The boss monsters are for different difficulties. So you can see here on the back of this, this is what a boss monster card will look like. You'll see that this has 3 little gates here. The gates on the back of the boss cards are how many players it's recommended for. So you'll see, you know, another 3, another 3. You'll see this one has 4 gates on it. So this is a 4-player boss. And also examples here for 2-player bosses. So the number of gates on the back of the boss monster cards are how many players is recommended for that boss. So, you know, you pick out your recommended amount of players, and you can even randomly pick from those bosses so you don't know which boss is going to come up. So, we can get into different card types now. As I've said, you have your player cards here. Each character has different stats and abilities that make their character unique. At the top here we have damage, which this is basically going to be what you roll whenever you are attacking monsters. On the other side here we have health, or your hit points. That's how much damage you can take before your character is knocked out. And you have speed, which is how many spaces you can move through the dungeon. Now, monsters are very similar to players in their stats. So here you can see on a monster card, we also have a very similar attack value, similar to the players. So you have a number here with an amount of dice that they roll. You have a number of hit points, but instead of movement speed, you have this loot icon right below the health. That is how much loot a monster will steal from the deck whenever it is spawned. So as you're playing, you'll be drawing cards from the deck. When a monster is on top and it is drawn, you will look at the front there, and that loot value will be how many cards you take from this deck and place under this monster. The only way to get that loot back is by defeating it. That is all of the components. Well, all except for this. We also have these player terms, like things that you can do on your turn. So you'll see here, most of these are in green. You can do any of these in green in any order, save for the draw action. So players are able to play any number of cards from their hand. They're able to trade cards with players as long as they're in the same room. They can move up to their movement speed, the stat that you see on your character card. Movement can be broken up as well. So like I said, you can do these in any order as much as you have the ability to do it. You get to draw, which we'll explain whenever we do game setup. You're able to do the draw action once per turn. And also using cards, powers, and abilities, you're able to use each of those once per card per turn. So activating your character ability, activating, you know, the ability of a room or a piece of equipment, you can do all of those once per card per turn. Now you'll see that there is a red action on the player turns. That will be the attacking action. So whenever you take the attack action, it will end your turn. Combat will be the final thing that you do on your turn. So you can't split up, you can't do attacking and then move and trade. You have to do everything beforehand, and attacking is the final thing that you do on your turn. On the other side of this token, we have key terms. They just kind of explain different keywords on the cards that you'll see that we'll talk about a bit, like building, jumping, shifting, sliding. I know those don't really mean anything to you right now, but we will get into and explain that in a bit. So now that we have all of our components here, let's go ahead and move things to the side and we will set up a game. We're just going to kind of go through the rule book here. We're not going to completely play a full game or anything, but we're just going to kind of explain how to do different points of the game. So whenever you begin your game, you will go ahead and pick a boss monster appropriate for the number of players that you are playing with. I am just going to go ahead and grab a 2-player here for the sake of it. So you're going to place that boss monster in the center of the table, whatever your play area is, right? So that is going to be at the center here. We're also going to get ready 2 of these starting room locations. They are the corridors of the rooms that have the green border around them. That's going to be where your players will start, essentially. So then we will go ahead and shuffle up our dungeon. And we're going to place them into our deck tower. Awesome. So now we're going to kind of set up the grid. Whenever you start this game, you'll have your boss monster at the center of the table. You will place cards going in a line for 3, and then you will place your player starting room at the end of that 3 on space 4 there. So this will be essentially where one of your players will start. Now you will do the same exact thing for the other player, going at the other end down here. This will be where the second player will start. So now that we have these cards here, these 3 cards in between your player starting area, the green border, and the boss with the gates on the back, these 3 cards will function as your starting hand. So that player is able to pick up those 3 cards and place them into their hand. This player also gets to take the cards. However, there was a monster that was drawn in the starting lineup. That monster will automatically go ahead and do the rules for the same as drawing a monster. So whenever a monster is drawn, you look at the front, you look at that loot value under their health there, and you take that many cards from the top of the deck. So in this case 2. Place them underneath the monster, and then you place that monster face up where it was in the lineup. So this player, because they drew a monster in their starting lineup, only gets 2 cards to start the game instead of 3 like the other player. And that is essentially the starting setup of the game. So these players will start separated out in the dungeon. Their goal ultimately is to come to this center boss and defeat it. Along the way, they're going to find, different types of cards, and they will try to gear up so that they're strong enough to fight this boss. So we can talk a little bit about the card types and how you kind of get that power to be able to fight that boss once you think you're confident enough to. So we will start with normal rooms. So normal rooms with no text, no colors, things like that. These are corridors. They essentially come in hallways that are 2 across, 3-way intersections, or as corners to go around. These are just simple, basic rooms to allow you to kind of function. They function to let you go through the dungeon and move, no special effects, right? Now, as I said before, every card is double-sided. So you'll see on the opposite end of a corridor, these are snacks, which are essentially one-time use consumable items. So you can use these at any point, even off of your turn, to help, a teammate or something, things like that. There are snacks that can heal damage, prevent damage, allow players to move extra spaces, allows players to teleport, things like that. So you're able to use those even off of your turn. Next, we have the blue cards. The room side of blue cards are shrines. Shrines have an effect that you can activate the first time that you walk into them. In this case, this shrine is a slide shrine, which we will talk about that action, but slide is basically a special type of movement, allowing you to go across multiple spaces in a line by only using one of your movement. So essentially this player would be able to move into here and use that room's action once per turn to be able to slide to the end of a hallway. So you can see that this room has a special function to it. On the other side of shrines, there are spells. Spells can be equipped to your character. And so a spell kind of works like a snack where you get a one-time effect. However, spells don't get used up. You can use the spell once per turn, but after using it, you still get to keep it, so you can use it on consecutive turns going forward. Next, we have wards. So wards are the purple cards. Wards function similarly to shrines, however, their benefit happens in an area of effect. So you can see on this room here, there are highlighted rooms in kind of a 3x3 grid. The effect of a ward's card happens anywhere in that highlighted area. So you can get the benefit of this room in any adjacent room. So even though I'm here in this shrine, I'd be able to get the benefit of this ward here because it is within the area of effect. So wards, similar to shrines, except they happen in an area. On the back of wards is armor, another piece of equipment that you can equip to your character. Armor gives you additional health. They'll let your character take more damage before being knocked out. A lot of armors also have special effects on them as well that will usually benefit you in some way, either extra movement, being able to avoid things throughout the dungeon, just allowing you to, kind of soak up more damage. And finally, we have the pink cards. The room side on that are traps. So traps are pretty unique in the way that they work. So whenever a character moves into a trap, they have to do a trap roll. So The player will take 1 die. They will roll that die. As soon as they enter the trap, they will add their speed stat to it. So in this case, +2. So a 4 plus 2 is 6. You'll see the challenge on this trap is a 7, however. So the player in this case would fail that trap roll. So you'll see a green positive on top. That is if you get the same number or beat it, you are able to gain that benefit for that turn. Or if you fail, like in this case, this character did, you would have to take the negative or the X at the bottom, which is, in this case, 2 damage. Traps are only activated, just like everything else, once per turn. However, it happens immediately when you walk in, whereas shrines and wards, you kind of have the option of using that ability. Traps force you to have to do the roll and either take the good or the bad. On the opposite side of traps are weapons. Weapons are another type of equipment. Instead of benefiting, taking more damage and things like that, these allow you to hit essentially better. They let you attack better whenever you are fighting monsters. So just like armor giving more health, it's kind of added up to what your character already has. Weapons will give you more attack power and will add up with what your character already has. So weapons can also have abilities much like armor. These ones usually benefit you in combat. So for example, this one, whenever you deal damage, you can jump, which is another action, a key term, essentially teleporting to any other room in a monster's area. If you have no cards in your hand, roll 1 extra attack die. So a player at any point can have 1 piece of equipment of each type. So you can see this would be a fully outfitted character with 1 spell, 1 weapon, and 1 armor. Okay, now that you know a bit about each of the types of cards and kind of how they work, we'll just go ahead and go through a player's turn. So we'll go through different actions that you can do. We'll talk about key terms and things like that. And then we will do a round of combat to show you how combat works. So this player, they started off with 3 cards in their starting lineup. So you will see that there is a spell and 2 weapons. On the flip side, obviously we have a shrine and 2 traps. So this character is going to go ahead and equip a spell and equip a weapon. So if they want to later swap out this weapon for this other one that they have, they would have to burn or discard the old weapon that they had in order to put the new one on if they wanted to. Same works for spells and for armor. So in this case, they are just going to equip this and keep this for later. So if we look at our player turns, we can play any number of cards from our hand. We played 2 here to equip them. We can trade cards with players in the same room. We're on opposite ends, can't trade. Can move up to your speed. However, we don't have any rooms to currently move, and all we have at the moment is a trap, which I don't think this character is going to do too well trying to go through. The next action is draw. Draw 1 card per open path in your room, once per turn. So I think since our character only has 1 card here, the best option would be to draw 1, 2, 3 cards, 1 for each open path next to them. If this character would have played a card here first and then decided to take their draw action, they would only be able to draw 2, because this is no longer an open path next to them. The only open paths are these two here. So because you can do these in any order on your turn, sometimes, you know, it might be more beneficial to move before you decide to draw cards, or, you know, use other things, build things before you do other actions. It's a little bit of strategy to being able to do things in certain orders. So in this case, this character is going to draw 1, 2, 3 cards to their hand for each open path. So now they have 3 more options: another trap, or essentially another weapon, possibly, and 2 corridors, or 2 snacks that they can decide to hold on to. Now, an important thing is there is a hand limit of 3 cards by the end of your turn. Any cards that you have over 3 at the end of your turn will have to be discarded away and just burned out of your hand, essentially wasted. So it is important to kind of plan out your hand if you want to keep snacks or keep a weapon to give to a teammate, something like that. Just thinking about which ones that you want, which ones you might want to throw away, things like that. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and use our cards. So we'll take our play action again because we have more cards to be able to use. So we're going to play this corridor by building it as a room in the dungeon. So we're going to build like this, and we're going to take our other corridor. So we're going to move because these actions can be broken up, and then we will play again and build this corridor here, and we will spend our second and final movement to move into here. Okay. This is all that this character can essentially do. They're going to hold on to these weapons. They don't want to use them quite yet. It's only 2 cards in their hand, so they don't have to discard down. There's no monsters to fight for them. That's essentially all that they can do on their turn. So then their turn, you know, they pass, it's over, it goes on to the next one. This player is very nearby to a monster. They had 2 cards that they drew in their lineup. So essentially they're 2 pieces of equipment. So this player is going to play their weapon and play their armor. Now this character isn't left with any cards in their hands because during setup, like I said, they only got 2. They decided to equip by playing both of those cards. Now they will go ahead and draw their 3. They got 2 snacks and another armor, or essentially a ward and 2 corridors. So this character very easily is going to decide to play a card here, and we are going to try to fight this monster here. So we have the Thunder Bear. It has a 7 attack and rolls 1 die. If it hits, you'll see the hearts here right under their attack value. That'll be how much damage they deal. So there's a difference between these red hearts and these black hearts that you'll see. So basically the black heart will be everybody that participated in that combat. So if you were, let's say, attacking with a teammate, everybody would take that 1 damage guaranteed. And then the red hearts, which are the 2 extra, you can then split up between you and your teammates or the people that participated in the combat. So let's say, for instance, both of these players were in the same room. They're both attacking this monster, and they failed to hit. So whenever the players fail the combat, they roll lower than the monster, then the monster deals damage to them. So with this black heart, for instance, this would automatically deal 1 damage to both players. And then there are 2 red hearts left. So 2 damage can then be split up however the 2 players who participated see fit. So this player is wearing armor, they say, hey, I can go ahead and take, that extra 2 damage so you don't have to. That is how the monster damage would work. So let's say this character is fighting by themselves. So you'll see your attack stat here. So this person, for instance, has a 2 with 1 die. They also have a weapon that gives them +3. So you'll put the 2 and the 3 together for 5 plus 1 die. So when doing combat, this character gets 1 player die. They add their character and their weapons attack values together with their die roll. So with this 5 and the 5, this character will get a 10. Now for the monster, they have a similar setup, except for this Thunder Bear, for instance, has a 7 and 1 die. So you would roll also a 5 plus 7. So this got a 12. So in this instance, this player would lose this combat, and since there are no teammates around to help, they would have to take all 3 damage from the Thunder Bear. Now, if this player decides to take all 3 of the damage on their armor, which has 3 health, when the armor fully takes its health in damage, it breaks and essentially gets burned or discarded. Now, a player is able to split up their damage if they choose. So let's say this character wants to keep their armor. From their 3 damage, they can take just 2 on their armor and then decide to take that final hit on their character themselves. If armors take full damage, they will break and be discarded. If the player character takes full damage enough to knock them out, then they are knocked out. So you might be thinking, it's a little difficult. The combat's a little difficult. I mean, a 7 and 1 die and like a 5 and 1 die just because they had a weapon. I mean, the combat's a little hard, right? So what are some ways that you can make combat a little bit easier? So we have snacks, right? Those consumables, those one-time uses. There are certain snacks that can give benefits to attacking, give you, pluses to attacking, pluses to damage dealt if you win the combat, things like that. Now, other ways to get ahead and fight monsters is to do it together. So grouping up. If you have 2 players in the same area as the monsters area, they can assist each other. So how assisting works is, instead of doing this normal combat like we did here, where it's 1 die from 1 player and then rolling whatever the monster's die is, if another player is in that monster's area as well, they get to assist them by giving them another die to roll. So this player, we get to roll an additional player die, which is, you can see, another 5. I'm rolling a lot of 5s. That would bring their total in this combat to a 15 versus the Thunder Bear's original 12, which means in this case, the player would win the combat. When players win combat, they deal a base of 1 damage to a monster, and then any additional effects, such as from their weapons or armor or room effects that they're in, could deal additional damage. Or snacks, such as this one, the Swole Shake, can give an additional damage to monsters. So we'll go ahead and use this, and now 2 damage. Once we get to the point of dealing enough damage to a monster to defeat it, players that are in that combat get the loot the monster was holding. If there are multiple players that are fighting the same monster, they can split up the loot however they see fit. So in this case, we'll just give one to each player. That monster is then flipped face down and turns into a 4-way room. So now you have more options, more places to draw from, things like that. Now we've, gone through players' turns. We've seen, kind of building rooms. We've seen equipping items. We've seen a bit of combat. We've seen, taking damage if you fail combat. We've seen fighting monsters, what happens after you defeat them and getting their loot back. So, like I said, ultimately the goal of this game is to come to the center to fight this boss. So, how you spawn this boss is by connecting any room to one of these gates. Once a room is connected to the gate, whether on purpose or by accident, that is when the boss monster will flip and spawn. Now, every boss functions, very similarly to a normal monster, except they don't have a loot total, because, it's the final boss. Either you win or lose during this fight. And they also mostly all have a flip effect. So as soon as they spawn, they will do an effect. So in this case, the Lunar Fox, you burn all empty corridors. So in this case, as soon as this boss spawns, all of these corridors here, they get discarded from the dungeon and they're gone. So you can see that bosses' effects, flip effects, things like that can be pretty game changing, right? Things that can kind of mess up your flow and the way that you've been building the dungeon so far. But yeah, so essentially that's kind of, your goal. You have your ways to get there. You have, we talked about all the different types of cards. We've seen combat, we've seen turns. There are optional rules. So this token, this end of round token, is an optional rule. It says you can burn one card from the top of the deck for each monster still on the map. So that includes the boss monster. So essentially, if you want to make the game a bit harder, you've played a lot of rounds, you kind of figured out your build, you feel like you know what you're doing, you've gotten your character and stuff, you can make the game harder with these rule variations. This is the Crumbling Dungeon, this end of round token. So pretty much essentially every round going around the table, you will burn cards from this deck for monsters that are remaining on the map, including the boss monster, even if it's not active. So it puts you kind of on more of a time limit, makes the game harder, makes the game go faster. You got to make your decisions a little faster. You can't just go around trying to get your perfect build. You kind of have to make do with what you get, right? We also have Danger Zone. It's an option that whenever you're moving out of a monster's area, you take damage for it. So it kind of forces you to stay in combat and kind of fight to the death kind of thing. There's Win or Die, which is normally players, when they tie in combat, the players would win that combat. They win ties. You could just change it that, the monsters then win the ties instead. Trust me, it makes the game definitely a lot harder. You'd be surprised how many times you can tie in combat in this game. I've seen it many, many, many times. Well, guys, that was a bit of how to play Shuffle Dungeons, kind of going through turns, telling you about different components, telling you about, your goal, how to reach that goal, how to do combat and all of that. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that helped you kind of learn a bit more about Shuffle Dungeons, maybe be a bit more interested. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.